Good morning. Welcome to Sales Chatter. This is the Logistics Podcast where we try to help 10,000 reps hit a million GP. I'm your co-host, Ryan Mohammed. With me is my main man, the bodacious cowboy, Jeff Dickinson, President and CEO of RGTX Logistics Solutions. How you doing this morning, brother?
Good, my man. It is Hump Day, our favorite day of the week besides Data Day. So with that said, let's get into this. Make it happen. Let's go.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
And like you said, it's really one of that great days of the week that I personally look forward to. And we got a lot of jam-packed stuff for you. But as you guys can see in your top right corner, we have an amazing guest today. We have my man, Matt from Dentro Carriers. He's a great friend, a great partner that I've personally had great conversations with. Matt, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you. Give us a little intro about who you are and what you do.
Thank you very much, Ryan. I am humbled and honored to be on this podcast and share my story with you guys and kind of get to chip in and share some transportation knowledge and have some conversation with you guys today. So my name is Matt Aquin. I kind of got into this whole transportation industry by accident, actually, by walking in the wrong door looking for a forklift driver job. Was asked if I was there to apply for the sales job, and here we are 17 years later. It's been a very interesting career for me. I was actually the youngest account executive in Vitran Express history at 22 years old. That started me down a whole different journey, though, with getting that kind of salary and that kind of money at such a young age. I kind of fell into some bad habits and some things that kind of led me off the path of where I was trying to go, and my career actually fell apart in my later 20s. But thankfully, through the help of a very good program and through my faith in God, got my life back on track. And now I'm here to help other people that are struggling. And I actually do mentor a few different people in this industry right now that are struggling with substance abuse, and just time management and just better ways to control the stress of our industry and different things like that. So if there's anybody out there that's struggling, anybody that's looking for just a friend to talk to, if you don't feel like anybody understands your struggle, I do. Reach out. I'm there to help you.
Awesome.
That is amazing. That is awesome, man. And then we got Dean as well. Dean, you're in a not a familiar place today. Can you tell everybody where you're at today and this week?
Yeah, I'm in Columbus, Indiana, home of Cummins Diesel. I think there's a Toyota factory here. I know there's a Class 1 railroad that comes past at 5:40 a.m. and blows his horn outside the hotel room. He had some chemical tanks on, a couple of gondolas, and a few grain hopper cars. I counted all 9 of them. And he was playing a pretty good tune that woke everybody up. So you got to love that. So we're at the ACT Research Conference. ACT Research are a partner of DAT. They're the premier company, been at it for decades. They're the company that tracks all of the used truck and trailer prices and new truck and trailer orders. So here at the conference, they're talking about the economic outlook for primarily truck and trailer orders, equipment, talking about electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles. So it's an outlook where a lot of the big truck manufacturers like to attend and get a feel for what's going on. A lot of macroeconomic stuff, but very good discussion about the freight market, what they're seeing coming up over the next couple of years in terms of freight demand. And that, of course, leads into what people predict for new truck and trailer orders. So a couple of data points popped out. Trailer order build slots are already full for this year. So the build time is out to 10.1 months, which means if you wanted a new trailer, you're talking about a 2024 delivery date. Things are getting better on the truck side. People still haven't got all the trucks they want. There's still what they call an undershoot. There were far less trucks ordered in the last 18 months, so there's a lot of pent-up demand. So build slots for Class 8 trucks are still way out to the end of the year. And I think what's interesting for all of us here as we think about buying capacity in the brokerage and logistics space is a lot of the large truckload carriers are going to start increasing their trade cycle. So as trucks start to increasingly come out of factories, as supply chain delays improve, they'll have quicker trade cycles, they'll shorten the age of their fleet, And then that'll flood the used truck market with a lot more trucks driving down used truck prices, which again is going to be a catalyst for people to come back and join the industry when spot rates start to increase again. So we're in this sort of, Tim Denoyer said on our show yesterday, he called it peak bottoming, which Ken said we need to get that on a t-shirt, but he was saying it's like the peak of the bottoming, which is a funny way to think about it. Right. He said the market feels like it's bottoming out. So we're in this, and remember, the spot rates lead contract rates by about 4 to 6 months. So we think spot rates are going to bottom out. And then the pundits expect that by the second half of this year, contract rates will start to rise again and capacity will tighten. And then we're back into that next phase of the sort of the inflationary part of the market cycle. So it's just a fascinating event here just to sit and listen to some very clever people. The president of CEO of Wabash was just on the podium talking about trailer orders. And he was talking about trailer pools. And this is a fascinating data point. They're talking about trailer to tractor ratios of 8 to 1 because of the proliferation of trailer pools and digital brokers, which is staggering when you think about, big fleets like Schneider are probably 4 to 1. Yeah. A lot of them still have a lot of trailers full of customer freight that they can't dispatch. So there's a mobile warehousing component to that. But typically in years gone by, it was like 3 to 1 would be a standard for-hire carrier trailer to tractor ratio. And the logic was one on the road and another trailer at the either end of the supply chain, loading, and one unloading. So in theory, you have 3 trailers allocated to every truck, but the truck keeps moving and does a lot of drop and hook. So when you start to talk about trailer pools, or what they call grey trailer pools, where it's a third party that owns the trailer pool and you can share trailers between shippers and carriers, you start to think about now why trailer orders are being so heavily pushed, because I think the evolving business model is, more utilization of trucks. But for the smaller carriers, it gives them access to drop and hook that they wouldn't normally get because that's only a big carrier function. So just some interesting trends about how we think about the freight market. The drop and hook model is certainly getting a lot of traction. Sorry for the pun on play on words there, but it's actually getting talked about. And of course, Wabash is a publicly traded company, so a lot of that information you can find on their website. So that's my intro to where I am this week.
Nice.
That's awesome, man. Just want to get a perspective from Matt as well. Is that something that Dentro that you guys kind of do? That you guys see a lot of drop and hook, or are you guys kind of like one pick, one kind of drop on your side there?
We do a lot of both actually. We're kind of varying into a whole different markets now over here at Dentro. So since I came over at Dentro, I've had a very big experience with flat deck. I've had very big experience with vans and reefers going, whether it be milk runs. We enjoy that kind of stuff too. It keeps our drivers busy for a longer time, and it's something that a lot of carriers have started to get away from. So when that market kind of loosens up, I try to get in there and be like, okay, well, I'll be your one-stop shop then, and we'll take away your problems, because with that, then two customers start to trust, okay, they're taking our more difficult stuff away here, so why don't we give them some of the better stuff as well? And that's kind of how I've built Dentro that way. We're doing things here at Dentro in the last couple months that they've never done before. Like, for example, now we're running up to Alaska directly. We're running up into the Northwest Territories directly. And I'm working on something right now to have us actually going into Mexico and doing stuff in and out of Mexico. Drop and hook, it's something that I've been doing now for a long time. I don't mind that kind of stuff. I'm seeing more of it as we're going along here. Like you said, with all these virtual brokers out here now, it's turning out that there's more non-asset stuff going on everywhere, and it's just pick drop stuff like that. I don't mind that kind of stuff. Again, if there's a customer need for it, I'm going to put my hat in the ring and take care of that for them. And at Dentro here, we're working on building that and kind of fine-tuning the way we do that to kind of help our customer base out a little bit better, as well as gain exposure in the industry by doing so.
Matt, you mentioned Mexico, right? So one of the large flatbed carriers, one of the largest in the countries here, not the largest, but well over 1,000 flatbeds. And they made a really interesting comment, seeing a very good year, very strong year. A lot of their customers are talking about a very strong flatbed year. So when you think about flatbed, you think about, steel, lumber, right down to machinery. So it's all sorts of things that open deck trailers haul. He said, we're just now starting to see the benefits of the infrastructure bill, with a lot more light poles and guardrails and things like that. And he said it's coming from Mexico. We are seeing a lot of infrastructure, flatbed freight coming across the border from Mexico, but we're starting to see that. And it got me thinking, maybe that's why, along with the warmer weather, we are seeing more volume in the flatbed market and rates rising in the national flatbed market, as opposed to dry van and refrigerated, where rates are dropping. So it's kind of a little bit unseasonal to have such a warm winter, especially in the northeast, not so much the Midwest. And then on top of that, we've got infrastructure bills starting to push some more volumes. But driving down from Indianapolis on Monday evening, I'm on I-65, and it's like an extension of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, right? I thought Massachusetts drivers were bad. Man.
I thought that was Toronto.
Well, no. So they're funny. Not a lot of speed signs, but they do have one distinct sign like every mile, and it's an orange sign that says "reckless driving, $1,000 or 6 years." And it's like, whoa.
If that's not a heavy warning, I don't know what is.
Anyway, so it was that was one thing that struck me. But my point is that the amount of warehouse space at Indianapolis, which is kind of like the intersection of the highway network in the country, the amount of warehouse space, Jeff, it didn't. So what is it, like 50 miles from Indy to Columbus?
Yeah.
It was 40 miles before warehouse development stopped heading south out of Indianapolis.
Really
some of these places are massive, these massive warehouse, these pop-up ones with the big prefab sides, they pop up, and they were just endless in terms of the amount of infrastructure that's been built, which of course is a lot of flatbed demand, a lot of aggregates, a lot of concrete, a lot of steel. So I think flatbed has benefited from that also. But just as we travel the country, you're talking about Grand Prairie, Jeff. We've seen it in Miami, but it's just striking to drive the interstates and actually see firsthand the amount of warehouse development that is still ongoing. That's the shocking part.
Yeah, and I think that that relates to the issues and the disruptions that we've seen in the past, where they didn't have enough warehouse space.
Right.
Now they're building it to make sure they do. And if we recall from a past podcast that we had, I read an article where they said that they need another 1 billion square feet of warehousing in the next 10 years. That's what you're seeing. Seeing
well, I think it's a growing freight task, right? So we've got this whiplash effect from over-ordering during the pandemic to now this we're having this inventory runoff. But I think your broader point is that over time, the freight task is going to grow. Populations are growing. So we're going to need more trucks, more trailers, more space, more logistics. So I think that's the general trend. We may see some builders pause some of their building activities, but I think longer term, you're still going to see a growth in that particular space.
Yeah, and Bethlehem, Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
huge. Yeah. There was so many farms there not so long ago, and they're all gone. We're talking 100, 200 door mega facilities popping up all over the place, just like that. Just a frame up, boom, and within a couple of months, they're at full tilt. Big Amazon DC is out there as well. Yep. And it's just amazing, when you look at that, and especially in the Houston area. And we'll get into that in a little bit because of the article that they sent me earlier. But it's just amazing. It really is. And when you drive those interstates and you just happen to look left and right, they're popping up all over the place.
You mentioned Allentown. I just looked at the big radius tool where I look at what's within 500 miles of city. On the big radius tool, anybody can look at this. It's bigradiustool.com, I think. From within 500 miles or a day's drive by truck, there's 101 million people. So a third of the US population lives within a day's drive of Allentown. If you're wondering about why you would put warehouses in Allentown, you're within, a matter of hours from New York City, Washington. You're an overnight drive to Boston. That's why you see a lot of fulfillment stores around that particular area. Yes, so just massive growth. It's exciting to see, to be part of this industry with the.
But there's a lot of feedback, though, the negative feedback from the residents in those areas that are not advocates. They're against the big ones. Even in Sparta, where I live in New Jersey, there's an uproar about The possibility of Amazon taking over an old cement factory that's been there for a long time in Sussex County. They say the infrastructure is going to get ruined. The trucks are going to wake up people. I mean, you could just go on and on. And I know it's not just in this town, but it's all across the U.S.
You're right.
Good point. Are upset about it.
Yep.
Canada as well. We kind of see it there, and it kind of like talks about a situation here. Like Matt and I are in Canada, and we both use the sister company Loadlink. They're based out of Mississauga, Ontario, and I know they're a sister company of DAT as well. And Dean, I know they came out with their January 2023 report in regards to that. So I'd love to get your details of what essentially is the forecast is looking at, especially like we're kind of seeing for people who don't know, who are American. Loadlink, we use it for domestic Canada shipments, and we use it for cross-border shipments. So that is basically our main load board that we use here. Like when I got trained in logistics as a logistics coordinator, that's all I used. We rarely used that or Internet Truck Stop because we kind of focused on that domestic Canada relationship. So with them coming out with their 2023 report, I think a lot of nuggets in there that we can share with the audience.
Yeah, so just for context, DAT and Loadlink are part of Roper Technologies, which is on the New York Stock Exchange. So we're part of that broader technology public company. But Loadlink are our sister company, as we like to say. In terms of the size of their business, they've been around for about 30 years. It's a sizable database. They've got about 7,500 Canadian carriers and freight brokers. So it's certainly representative of the US market. And the data that came out, if you go to loadlink.ca, you can read their latest report that says that they started the year with the third highest January recorded in the company's history, which is, just fascinating when you think about spot market activity. When you break it down, though, the spot market started off very strong. We're coming up on year-over-year comps, which remember this time last year we had the cross-border protests and the blockades. So when you think about impact on freight market, we're about to lap that particular period. So your comps become a little bit squirrely. But the data point that jumped out at me, Ryan, was the inbound. And we want to show the summary chart, which shows the January load changes for cross-border, intra, and other. The data shows that inbound loads from US into Canada were up 52% in January compared to December. Still down year over year, though, so they're still much lower. So to my point about being careful with year over year comps, it's 26% lower than this time last year, but higher than December. So that's great news. Outbound loads from Canada down 2% in the month, down 34%. So that speaks to the overall, changes in the, manufacturing base. I'll let you guys speak to that a bit more. Intra-Canada, Canada to Canada loads up 11%, down 16% year over year. One of the themes that I wanted to talk a little bit about, guys, was the effect of winter. So what we see over winter is spot rates for a lot of lanes tend to increase when we see the St. Lawrence Seaway freeze up and, ice clearing reduces. They take away the navigation buoys. The Welland Canal closed on January 9, I think. It won't open until sometime in March. And what we see is that van and reefer rates rise in December and January. They're up about 6% in January. 6% in December. They rose another 19% in January. These are inbound spot rates into Ontario. Reefer rates were up 11% in December, up 14% in January. Van rates into London, Ontario, up 20% in January. Some of the largest increases out of the Great Lakes region and East Coast ports, like rates out of Green Bay and Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Rock Island, Illinois, Elizabeth, New Jersey, Allentown, PA, all up in the range of 20 to 30% month over month. So on average, you're seeing rates increase. In particular, reefer rates, one of the data points you'll see on the Loadlink report, spot freight highlights was Philadelphia to Toronto refrigerated. And I think these are spot rates or maybe volume up 509% year over year. I'm not sure if that's volume or rates, but the data point that we've talked about on the show before is that reefer rates into Ontario on average out of Philadelphia saw about a 16% month over month increase in January. Most of it's concentrated in the Philly area. rates out of Allentown are up, Philly are up. The reason Philadelphia reefer rates are up is because it's where a lot of the break bulk reefers come in from South America and Northern Africa. So we get Moroccan citrus, Chilean grapes, blueberries. They run break bulk reefers as opposed to container ships. There are some containers that come in. Break bulk reefers will have they can get into the smaller ports on the west coast of South America a lot more easily than the big container ships. So they tend to run smaller, 4,500 pallet break bulk reefers. They drop them onto the dock, and then from there, it's an 8-9 hour shot straight into Toronto from the Philadelphia market. And so when the St. Lawrence Seaway closes down, what we start to see in December and January is a percentage of freight volume move to the truckload market that would have normally gone through the St. Lawrence Seaway straight into, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal ports. So that's just a trend to watch. We see it every year. There's definitely a seasonal bump. I looked at the rates today. The rates aren't up anywhere near what they used to be compared to this time last year, because everywhere is way down. But if I give you a sense of what rates are doing today for refrigerated loads from Philly to Toronto, they're about $2.40 a mile, excluding fuel. This time a year ago, $5 a mile. So, there is a seasonal hump that you see that peaks in March each year on that particular lane, but we are, trading far lower than where we were this time last year. It's even the same on that lane that we looked at, which was we called Auto Alley. If we look at Laredo, where you got a lot of auto parts come across the southern border, I remember this time last year, we were talking about spot rates at $3 a mile. Today, they're exactly a half at $1.50. So the whole freight market has cooled, in particular on a lot of those lanes northbound. But I think the fact that there's increased volumes heading in is good. I'm a little bit concerned about the imbalance. Maybe that's something Matt and Ryan can speak to, because if you've got an imbalance of loads going out versus loads coming in, that's going to drive up your inbound rates to compensate for running back with either less loads or running back empty across the border. So how do you guys see the Canadian freight market given all of that? Do you see it improving? Is it down compared to last year? What's the status?
Compared to last year, I feel like the rates are well down. And like you said about that imbalance of the inbound versus outbound, I think that throws a huge kink into all carriers' plans too. I'm finding that there's waves in this industry right now. I feel like a lot of freight's moving in one direction, and then you have an imbalance, and then you have a pile of trucks and a pile of equipment in a place where there's not a whole lot of freight coming out of, right? So it does get tough, and then all of a sudden you're asking for way more money to go to that direction, because your truck's going to be sitting. Your teams are going to be looking for 1, 2, 3 days looking for a loads. Like right now, I'm finding a lot of that in Vancouver. There's a ton of loads coming out of Ontario to BC, but there seems to be a big drop over the last month and a half of freight coming out of BC heading back east. And I'm finding that I'm getting multiple offers all the time about loads going out of Ontario to BC, because I guess carriers are getting smart to it now. So they're not taking those loads, or like you said, they're raising the rate, and the customer's not on board with that yet. It hasn't hit the consumer yet.
Right. I wonder who do we know on the West Coast that we could ask about that? Is there a trucking company out there we know?
Daman. Yeah, there's a certain one that we know. I know he's watching. David's actually watching. We'd love to get some insight on there.
Sorry, jump in. Yeah. So Matt, let me ask you a question. One of the trends we saw during the pandemic was new origin destination pairings popping up because suppliers had changed. So you have a pull point for one particular item of a manufacturing process. That manufacturer goes down, goes out of business, has staff issues. Then you have to pull a load from another location. Is that part of why you're seeing the imbalance? Is it at the customer level?
I think it has a big thing to do with that, because you're not prepared. Right. So here's the thing. It's not like it's one location in Allentown, Pennsylvania to another location in Allentown, Pennsylvania. It could be your location was Allentown, Pennsylvania. Now you're loading in Knoxville, Tennessee, because that's where their plant is, right? It takes time to get that swing of trucks back in there and work on the reloads and work on how you're going to get your trucks repositioned back. I believe that's bringing rates up across the border right now. But again, in Canada, I'm still not seeing that. I'm seeing that the rates are heavy one way and really light coming the other way right now. But I think that's going to go up both ways, because, as you said, there's an imbalance right now, and that's going to drive the rates up.
Yeah, we're seeing, imbalance in a lot of markets. One of the things that they talked about at the conference here today was hashtag no more empty miles. I have to look this up, but and I think they kind of misunderstand the point. They're saying that 38% of miles in this country are empty. Well, sometimes round trip rates, you got an empty round trip, part of it. It doesn't mean you lose money. It's about your revenue per tractor week. And sometimes empty miles can get you into a market where you can actually make more money over the course of the week. So not all empty miles are bad, but I think carriers knowing their operating costs, to your point, Matt, about making sure you're loading the inbound rate to reflect the decreasing demand on the way back out is absolutely critical. Hashtag no more empty miles. Yeah. So what's Daman saying there, Ryan? Produce was also slower on the West Coast. Yeah, that's a good point. Volumes are still way down. They're still suffering on the West Coast and southern and northern Cal because of the massive rains they've had. That market still hasn't recovered. Their freight volumes, last time I looked, were down about 70% when you look at the weekly volumes of truckload of fruit and veg coming out of there. So it hasn't picked up yet, but we're in between seasons. So I'm not alarmed. I think we're just off to a slow start on the West Coast. So I think this could be a really good year if they can get the plantings underway.
Boy, I'll tell you
one week, slow the next.
I'll tell you one thing, though. You're talking about BC and carriers sitting there. Boy, I'll tell you what, if you have a niche and you have outbound from that area coming back to you, boy, you are sitting pretty. You are sitting real pretty. But it's finding that diamond in the rough, right? Which is difficult at this time of year for sure.
Absolutely.
I'm just looking at Seattle to Los Angeles is generally a good bellwether. Seattle to Los Angeles is paying 90 cents a mile. Oof. But on the northbound, capacity is really loose. At this time last year, it was $1.80. So it was $1 per mile higher this time last year because there were a lot more imports coming into the Pacific Northwest. That's fallen away. And but 90 cents a mile. What are you loading northbound? Los Angeles, Seattle, 1,100 miles. Northbound is 286. Sorry, that's with fuel, 234. So you're getting 234 on the northbound and then 90 cents. At 90 cents, guys, what's it going to take? What's it going to cost me in fuel? It's going to cost me that in fuel. Probably a little bit less than that, what I'm going to get on the rates. But, gee, that's a low rate. So that speaks to how much excess capacity there is in the Pacific Northwest at the moment. So do you want to have a quick run around the markets, Ryan, like what's happening in the different equipment types?
Yeah, I would love to get that, especially I know myself, I'm keeping an eye on the open deck stuff, so I'd love to kind of see what that's kind of going.
Yeah, so there's a big difference in the freight markets between where we sit with dry vans, reefers, and flatbeds. So generally speaking, in the dry van market, load posts, this time last year, we were seeing spot market load posts triple last week's volume. So this is why you can't say volumes are down compared to this time last year, because I think this time last year was one of those market outlier periods where you've almost got to discount it, but practically identical to 2018 levels, which I think is a really interesting data point because that was a good freight year for carriers. But the problem is that because of the excess number of carriers that have joined the market, excess to loads, supply is overshooting demand right now by a long way, and we are seeing record levels of carriers posting their trucks on load boards looking for freight. So capacity is very loose. Demand is kind of about where 2018 levels. Rates are dropping. They're tracking seasonally. It's not unusual to see rates drop. They're about 20 cents a mile higher than where we were in 2018 for dry van, but still almost $1 a mile lower than this time last year. So capacity is tightening. Regionally though, to previous point, there's a lot of regional volume that carriers can make pretty good revenue per mile on some of the regional lanes, not necessarily the national average. It's Mardi Gras wraps up this week, so a lot of capacity tightened into New Orleans. So we're seeing some pretty good revenue there. In the refrigerated market, again, load posts in the spot market for reefer carriers were 3 times lower last week than where they were this time last year. Produce volumes nationally are down about 12%. It's the number of truckloads moving each week. So they're lower than this time last year. That's a drag on the amount of volume in the load reefer market, because a lot of that spot market activity does move from farms for a lot of carriers in our network. We're also seeing the number of carriers posting their equipment on our load boards looking for loads at the highest level in 7 years. Rates have dropped 33 cents a mile since the start of the year. National average reefer rates at about $2.04 per mile. It's $1.03 lower than this time last year. So a reasonably gloomy story for dry van and reefer, which of course is the bulk of the market. But then you go to flatbed, and flatbed rates have been increasing for the prior 4 weeks. They did flatten out a little bit last week, but still substantially lower than where they were this time last year. The data point that is interesting, so flatbed, 2018 was a primarily flatbed rate rally because we had a very robust industrial economy. But dry van and reefer did benefit from that. But the volume of load posts in the spot market last week for flatbed is about 75% lower than this time last year, but half what they were in 2018. So there's a lot less activity in the flatbed market because of obviously things like higher interest rates and we're building 33% fewer homes, single family homes this year here in the US. So the market is definitely cratered on the housing side of it. So there's a lot there's a lot less activity, but carrier posts are still high. But I think what's happening is a warmer winter and some of this volume we alluded to coming across for the southern border for the infrastructure bill, large projects that are underway, and obviously domestic manufacturing to meet that demand. Line haul rates for flatbed actually increased for the 4th week in a row. So while dry van and reefer rates are heading south, flatbed rates are heading north, with our forecast having spot rates continue to climb well through summer. And there's some pockets where flatbed market is very, very strong, like Los Angeles on the West Coast is particularly good for flatbed carriers, not dry van and reefer. Dallas-Fort Worth, another strong market. Dallas to El Paso is another really strong market. Volumes in Mobile are up. Mobile to Lakeland, $2.77 a mile. So if you think about loads to Miami out of Mobile, Alabama, are $2.89 a mile. National average is $2.13 a mile. So I think it depends where you run and operate as to to Matt's point about what rates are going to look like, because I think it's a really regional story. We have a saying, and it's not mine, but I'll claim ownership to it because I use it more often, is that there's no one home at the average. And if you think about that in statistical terms, the opportunities for carriers are on either ends of that spectrum. You see 90 cents a mile southbound out of Seattle, but you'll see nearly $3 a mile from Mobile to Lakeland or Miami. So I think it depends on, you've got to be very savvy about where you operate. You've got to use data and technology and listen to shows like this, so you can understand that you've got to use information to your advantage to make sure you're ahead of the curve as opposed to reacting to it. It's something we talk to carriers about is, it's like my comment earlier about empty miles. Well, not all empty miles are bad. I mean, I've used empty miles to my advantage quite often, but I do know that I've already had to factor in that empty mile component into my head haul rate. Right. And that's where you've got to be savvy about understanding. You've got to study this industry. You've got to be a student of this industry, and you can never stop learning. I've been at it 45 years in transportation in different forms, and I still learn stuff every single day because I take a pretty big bucket to fill. Like some people take a little tiny bucket to a conference and they don't get much in it. Man, I've got the tanker out there. I'm loading stuff in that thing and trying to figure out how much I can learn every single day.
Every day.
Yeah.
If you're not learning every day, you're missing the boat. You really
absolutely
are. Because it's changing. It's changing
rapidly,
at a rapid pace.
Yeah.
You look at technology back in the 80s and 90s, it's nowhere where it was now. And now we're like really moving at a very fast pace. So,
yeah, we were having a discussion about that this morning, Jeff. One of the things we've noticed is that freight cycles are changing. The amplitude, the way up and the way down is getting much higher. If you think about the 2014, 15, 16 freight cycle, rates went up 5%, then they came down 5% year over year. In the 2018 period, they went up like 15 to 20% year over year, then they came down 15 to 20% year over year. in the last freight cycle, they went up 70% year over year last year, and now they're down. They're heading south at about 40% down year over year. So the ups and downs are getting higher, and they're getting shorter in duration. Yeah. And one of the things that we've theorized about, the reason why rates are becoming more dynamic, more responsive, it's a bit like getting your stock prices from the Wall Street Journal versus getting it on your app on a phone. So information travels much faster. When you've got more information readily disposable, you better access to information makes markets move faster. Yep. And that's what we're seeing in the spot market in particular, is carriers. I remember talking to a good friend of mine, Darby Pedro, who runs a reefer truck out of Boston, and really successful operator, good mix of spot and contract. And he was showing me, he just bought his new truck. He was a car hauler driver for 9 years, and jumped into power only, then bought his own reefer trailer. And I said, so how do you do this? And he just pulled out the app, the DAT1 app, and he showed me all the loads, and he said, here's what I do. I look at all the loads on the lanes. I look at the rates. I book it now. I allow the trailer to be tracked on the load on the app so I can get, everything's done. And he said, I know nothing about freight. I'm an expert car hauler, but I can look at this data on this app, and I know exactly what's moving where and how I need to play the market, because he was showing me on his phone. So think back to, maybe even 5 years prior to that. I don't know that you could have had that level of transparency around the freight market. So that's why we're seeing markets move much faster, I think, now.
I agree.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I remember even 5 years ago, we just kind of use the Loadlink, post it, and then get flooded with a bunch of calls. But now I can go on to any kind of website and just find out the data that I need to find out before I even try to post or try to have those conversations. So technology is it's here. It's here to help us. And everyone talks about AI, but that's a different discussion. But you can use that to your advantage, right? So
Gail makes an interesting point there in the comments. Ryan, BC outbound, maybe this is talking to Matt's point, BC outbound is particularly slow, coupled with high demand for inbound from the eastern states. So when Gail says eastern states, she'd be referring to eastern Canadian states or provinces, or eastern US states?
I'd say both, to be honest. It's bad just coming out of there everywhere right now.
Okay.
We have trucks sitting there all the time, and it's a grind to get it. And then you see the rates quickly drop, because carriers are basically, it's a race to the bottom at that point to grab that load, and then that catches up. And unfortunately, when that happens, it starts to generate the lane rate, right? The customers start to be like, well, that's what this lane pays now. Well, that's not true. That's not true.
Right. Because they've got to take something and nothing to get out of Dodge.
Yeah. But sometimes you have to do that, though. And that's what people don't understand. I get all these prideful guys saying, well, no, I'm worth this, and then you enjoy sitting there, because time to get moving and get back to your head hauling. Do you know what I mean? Get back to where you're going to make money. Sometimes you gotta bite the bullet just to keep moving, because there's a cost involved with sitting, and that cost isn't just for your company, it's for your customer. Right? Because the longer you sit there waiting for your $4 a mile load that's not coming, you can't get back to your customer's next load. All of a sudden, you can't get them a truck, you can't get them a trailer. They're going to call somebody else, and if they don't drop the ball, why would they switch?
That's right.
Well, it depends about your mortgage on your vehicle as well. Can you afford to sit there and not get paid and still make that monthly mortgage on that truck? And then you got the guys that already have that paid off. It's scot-free, and they can sit a little bit, because they're gonna play the market a little bit and see if they can get that almighty dollar to move it. So you have half a dozen here, half a dozen there. So but it does drive the rates down when you take those low rates.
Right.
It hurts everybody.
Sometimes the load of post holes and glider engines is actually worthwhile. Sometimes
gotta do what you gotta do.
All the nosy truckers that say, what are you hauling? Say, post holes. And say, oh, really? How much do they weigh? So not much. Or next day might be glider engines. And they go on about, say, glider engines, where do you load those from? Dude, get a grip.
Right?
That's a bit serious. When you're on the CB talking about it, you've got all the nosy truckers wanting to know, because their sales reps are following you around in their cars trying to steal the freight.
Where do you get them?
Yeah, where do you get that? Yeah. Yeah, glider engines. We get it from the airfield, something like that. Yeah, you're going to have fun with this. Yeah, these are tough times though, right? So notice diesel was down about 7. National average was down about 7 cents yesterday. What is it? 4.37 nationally. I mean, that's incredibly good news for carriers. I pulled some stats this morning in case you're interested on what the data shows from the year-over-year trends. We are doing pretty well on the comp side. Remember, diesel was this time a year ago. It was, what was it? Not this time a year ago. I think we're about 36 cents 36 cents lower. Let me just quickly pull up this data because it shows we are ULSD. Here it is here. So we are year over year. So we're down 80 cents a gallon year over year, 21%. We're 25 cents lower than the July 08 peak of 477. And I think we are down, it was 580. I think it was 580 was the previous high in June last year. So we're down from 580 to 454 this week. So that's actually 437, I think it was yesterday, according to the EIA. They were a day late because of President's Day. So I mean, that's great news for all of us. I was noticed on, I don't know if you follow the Gas Buddy on, is it Patrick Daman, Gas Buddy on Twitter. He had a really interesting quote the other day, and he was talking about diesel prices being down in the $4 range this year. And I thought that was a really bullish outlook. Some of the things he said in the reason for that, if I can quickly pull up his tweet. So the reason he said, big deflation to diesel coming. By June, there is a possibility that diesel prices, it was $2 per gallon lower. So that's going to put them just north of $2 a gallon. I mean, that's an incredibly bullish statement. And the Twitter thread went on to say why. And he said supply improvements, a mild winter, weak consumption, and improving refinery production. So, gosh, if diesel prices were $2 or lower, that would certainly accelerate the next freight cycle. Because what'll coincide with that is shorter trade cycles, more trucks coming out of factories, more trucks hitting the used truck market as larger fleets shorten their age of their fleet. If you have more trades hitting the used truck market, used truck prices will revert back to normal seasonal levels, and that will coincide with carriers wanting to get started back in the industry again. And we're seeing, so to put some numbers around that, we saw the industry start to lose capacity in October, November last year. We've lost about 2,500 carriers per month since October. This month, though, it's turned more positive. We only lost about 1,100 carriers so far in the month of February. So the trend. So when you look at the overall trend line, we were losing capacity from October. We're still losing capacity, but at a slower rate. At some point in the next month or so, we'll start adding net new capacity because every month there are carriers coming and going from the industry. And but what we're looking at now is that there's still more carriers leaving than coming in. So that's once you start to see it turn positive, then capacity is going to tighten, and that usually is the bottom of the freight cycle, and then rates come back up. We expect that, for those doing RFPs and thinking about spot rates, if spot rates are bottoming out, it'll be 4 to 6 months before contract rates start to bottom out and come back up again. But I think the important point is that contract rates today are sitting at, if I take contract rates today are sitting at national average is $2.88 a mile, $2.35 excluding fuel. Our forecast for the second half of this year have spot rates decreasing, but nowhere near the lows of 2019. Right. So even if they drop to $2.50 a mile from where they are today, from the 288, right, they'd still be 25% higher than 2019 levels. So I think the notion that we'll see rates drop, back to pre this cycle, I think are unrealistic, largely because, if we said last week, carriers have been more disciplined about cost this time around in their RFPs. And even though we're seeing RFPs come in lower, carriers have got a much higher operating cost base this time around.
Yeah, just a real quick question to either Ryan or Matt. Is it still $3 and change a liter in Canada
No,
right
not a
now?
liter. No. It's never been $3. I think it was like a gallon we were talking about. I know I filled in my area. I filled for $1.38 on the weekend.
We're
And
$1.51 here right now.
yeah,
$1.51
yeah,
$1.51 a liter.
a liter. Yeah. So
So
we're
you're
looking
over
at about
$6
$6
a
a
gallon,
gallon.
right?
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'll
that's
Wow.
what
take
we're
that 4.44 a gallon any day of the week if you guys
Yeah.
want to send that fuel down this way.
looking. That's also going to see because and one thing that I don't know about Matt where he is at, but our area, everyone has Teslas, everyone has hybrid
Right.
vehicles. It's
Yeah.
that's the way it is. Like it takes me $30 to fill our hybrid, and we get 600 kilometers with it. So
Yeah.
it's just I feel that's the way like the gas guzzlers or anything like that you think about those days. It's just not feasible.
Yeah.
Hey, Dean,
Yeah.
the article that you sent us about the disruptions in Long Beach and the movement of freight, and we're seeing that being moved to the Houston, New Jersey, New York, Savannah ports. What's going on with that? I found that article very, very interesting. I think Sikora has his hands full with the
Oh, yeah.
the new agreement if it ever comes to fruition. Shippers are still very hesitant on moving their
Right.
freight through that port.
Right.
And what are your thoughts on that? I mean, it
Yeah.
looks grim.
Yeah, I think it is grim because as we sort of talked about on the show a few months ago, maybe a few weeks ago now, that we're into that order cycle where shippers will be thinking about which areas they're routing their goods through. I think you're in a situation now where even though contract talks have started, restarted, I think you're still going to see a lot of shippers reroute their freight, their discretionary freight, let's call it that,
Yeah.
to the Gulf Coast and East Coast. So that trend, I think, will continue. We're seeing more capacity move away from China to Southeast Asia, which brings it direct through the Suez Canal to the East Coast. That's definitely going to stick. I think there's been a lot of damage done. I mean, shippers, it's still, don't forget, West Coast is still the closest port to northern China, right? Which is where about 46% of our imports come from. So it's still the shortest route. It's still a massive economy on the West Coast. But the cost of moving goods inland is still relatively inexpensive by train. So I still think there's going to be a certain volume of freight stick on the West Coast, but I think there's a lot more shippers will probably start to use on a longer term basis the Eastern Gulf Coast. In particular, we're seeing a lot more volume coming to Houston and Mobile in particular. The data point that stuck out there was his headline, which is "Don't bet against LA." And I thought, wow, that's a tough ask because you've got a lot of intermodal issues, you've got a lot of congestion issues, you've got a lot of anti-trucking, anti-rail issues, a lot of push towards greener technologies. There's you've got older trucks being forced out of the market, rightly or wrongly. So I think you're going to find that there's a lot of things going against trucking activity, in general on the West Coast. And that could push more to rail. But interestingly, when I was in Tucson the other day, I'm seeing guys out there draying containers, international containers, east of Tucson. So they're obviously heading to El Paso or somewhere like that, possibly heading to Dallas. But they're draying containers a long way off the West Coast. So, yeah, I think I think part of it's permanent. As to how much, though, Jeff, I'm not sure. I've seen some of the experts talk about, somewhere between 8 to 10% of import volume will stick permanently to the Eastern Gulf Coast ports. That sounds realistic, but again, I don't know how that would have to wait for our data to, emerge over the next few months. We're still around 2 million TEU, so we're still around pretty healthy import levels. But for context, that's pretty much exactly where we were in 2019 in terms of the volume.
The other problem too, that's not really been talked about is what about all the new warehousing that they're building out in that area? What are they going to do with that? Because once it's built and they can't fill it, they still got to pay for it, So, I mean, they have their hands full. There's huge other problems that are existing.
So it's a good question. At the Stifel conference, I talked to a private equity firm that has a lot of interest in that area. And they said something that was very interesting. The reason you haven't seen the rate of growth in like Stockton, Ontario, that you would have normally seen in other areas is lack of space and a lot more regulations around building requirements.
Yeah.
So his comment to me was they're already tapped out. And we saw that during the pandemic. We saw it through when the imports were levied on China when they wanted, what was it, a 20% tariff on imported goods from China at the start of 2019. So we saw a massive pull forward of imports in late 2018 that absolutely flooded the warehouse markets around Ontario and all the way up to Stockton. So they haven't recovered really from that. And then we had the COVID surge of retail imports. And that's why you saw a lot of imports flood Denver, Dallas, Phoenix markets, and so much warehouse growth around there. So I think that's even if it, we come back to normal levels, I still think you'll see a lot more warehouse activity further inland because those markets are pretty well tapped out. Now,
but you're seeing a lot of discounting. You're seeing a tremendous amount of discounting right now because, I mean, let's face it, those warehouses are blowing out at the seams and they need to move that inventory. They can't sit on it. I'm seeing stuff at 80%, 70%. We get it all the time. I mean, they're trying to move that because they've been sitting on it for months, if not a half a year or so, So it's unbelievable. They're trying. They're trying to get more space that way.
Yeah, I'm just reading some of the notes here. But you're right. I think some of it is permanent. Ryan, do you want to have a quick look at the questions while we've got time here? So, do you think transit times will play a factor in which port is being used? Yeah, almost double the transit times from the west. Absolutely, Daman. I think that's why we've seen such a flood of, again, bad choice of words, but a flood of break bulk and container imports into Houston and Mobile in particular, because of their immediate access to major interstates. Even the inland waterway out of New Orleans has been a big boost to a lot of shippers moving break bulk freight. So I think that's the trend that I've seen on the East Coast is much longer dray hauls. So you're seeing, well north of 500 miles of 40-foot containers being drayed off the East Coast, which is, I've only been here 22 years, but that's not something that I've seen going back, 5 years and earlier. So I think transit times are a big part of it. But I also think, David, it's commodity specific because there are a lot of shippers right now who are very happy for trains to take as long as they like to get there because they have inventory issues and they're looking for that extra storage space. So I think it's very commodity specific. And the next question is about volatility. I've also heard the transit times. Yep.
So volatility in ETAs to each customers, and I would imagine the volatility would increase based on the longer transit time.
Yeah, again, I think it's commodity specific. It's I think you've got a lead time factor that's pertinent to each particular commodity. But Truckload has proved in the last couple of years to be very nimble, very agile. Rates have come back down. Remember Dan talked about his 2 containers of bed linen that came in from Shanghai, destined for Orlando, Florida. And the 2 weeks at anchor delay ate into his intermodal transit from the West Coast to Orlando. So it was 10 grand per 40-foot container on a team truck because he had to be on time. So his whole intermodal transit was eaten up by that. I think it's interesting. The intermodal network still hasn't hit its straps yet. They've still got some, velocity issues. I do think that's improving though. So we could see some improvements there on the rail side.
Awesome. Kind of see John says we're coming up to wrap up today's amazing episode of Data Day. Dean, can you give a little bit more of where you're at? I know you mentioned at the beginning, but are you going to be speaking this week and anything that you got coming up as well?
Yeah, I'm speaking this afternoon on a panel with the CFO of Melton Truck Lines and the CFO of Grammar Freight Lines, and Tim Denoy is hosting it. We're talking about the truckload freight market today. You'll be able to read about this a lot in the press, but Ac Research is the big dogs in the used truck and trailer and new equipment order space. So you'll see a lot of that coming out in the press in coming months. And then I'm on SiriusXM on Friday morning talking with Jimmy Mack about, we're talking all things trucking, 8 a.m. Eastern, Road Dog Radio, channel 146. It's always a good show. He's one of the best DJs in the business.
Nice.
If I could quote the Princess Bride line where Vizzini says to the what do we call the guy that with the mask? He says, truly a dizzying intellect. when he's trying to feed him iocane powder. Remember the scene from Princess Bride? If you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. He said, truly a dizzying intellect. So all I say when I'm listening to Jimmy Mack is, gosh, this guy's got a dizzying intellect. He's so smart, so clever. But he's a great listen. It's a wonderful show to listen to him. He's on from 7 to 11 every day on the Drive Time show.
7 to 11. That's amazing
It's
to
a
kind of
lot,
see.
yeah.
And you're co-host of the Dad IQ Live Show every
IQ
Tuesday
show.
at 10 a.m.
Yeah. So next week we've got an interesting guest. Cody Cole is coming on from ANZ Trucking. He's on next Tuesday, and we're going to be talking about the Salinas produce season. So it's kind of the first big event that happens over there. They've just had a lot of rain. Salinas is obviously home to a lot of strawberries and lettuce. But so we're going to be talking about the produce season in the sort of, because we're now starting to get into talking about the upcoming produce season. So he'll be a good guest with 10 a.m. Eastern. You can catch us on LinkedIn and YouTube.
Fun stuff. And Matt, it's been such a pleasure having you on this morning, brother. It's you fit in like a glove, you know. It's been amazing. So if people want to get a hold of you, Matt, how can they get a hold of you? Promote yourself a little bit here, brother.
Yeah, you guys can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or as you guys know, I'm the vice president at Dentro Carriers. Give me a call anytime. If you're struggling, call me. If you got freight, call me twice.
There you go.
All right.
So we want to thank, Matt, Dean for being here with us. Want to thank everybody in the audience spending your Wednesday morning with us. It's been amazing. If you did find value in this, please like, comment, subscribe to us, share this with a colleague. Let them know that they can use data to share their story. Catch us back on the replay. We'll hit the replay again at 2 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. Eastern time today, and on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all that fun stuff there. And Jeff, take us out, my man.
Yeah, Matt, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. We definitely have to do it again. Dean, as always, great insights. Figuring out what's happening in the market, what's working, what's not working. It helps out everybody in the industry. So thank you so much. And also to Daman and Centurion Trucking, thank you so much. Daman is hiring new agents out there at 60% margin. So if you want to get a good job and work for a great guy, reach out to Daman. And with that said, have a great day, guys. The Bodacious Cowboy is out.